Hello all, my name is Sylvain Rochon, the Paradise Engineer, and I'm making this video in parallel to writing an article that's going to be published soon on the internet. The link is down below if you want to check it out. This is about the meaning of being human, especially in the fourth industrial revolution, where we have AI and all sorts of other technologies that allows us, in essence, to enhance who we are, either biological enhancements or artificial enhancements like cybernetic, synthetic limbs, eyes, and different appendages that we can modify ourselves. Because traditionally, being human means a specific type of DNA, a specific type of look. And when we did need prosthetics, because losing an arm or a leg or a part of our body, usually it meant having a mechanical part installed that was inferior to the biological element that we lost. So typically people would, with a synthetic appendage or prosthetic, would be called disabled. And it's still are today, because they can do a little bit less than what they used to be doing. But that's simply because the appendage itself had a lesser form, was less efficient than the original biological body, or biological body part. Now, moving ahead, now we're actually getting some pretty interesting results with prosthetics that are directly connected to the brain and that have significant advancements in movement capabilities, also sensitivity, like allowing people through the mechanical hand, for example, to have a sense of touch. This has been moving along for a little while, a fairly brisk pace in complexity, and of course the costs are still pretty high, but we're getting up there. And within the next 20 to 40 years, the next couple of generations, lots of things are going to happen, including having mechanical bars that could be viewed as an enhancement to the biological component it replaces. And that brings up several interesting questions. Like, if you have several cybernetic implants and parts of your bodies, are you still human? What does it mean to actually be human when you can actually enhance yourself mechanically, where there's actually a demand and a market for people to intentionally get parts of of their body removed and replaced with mechanical parts, inherently, because they are superior in some way, not equal necessarily, but superior in their view to the original part. And then, are we going to be creating a certain subdivision of humanity by doing this? Cyborgs, for example. It gets a bit complicated because it's fairly easy for us to see cybernetic implants. We even have a word for it, like cyborgs, right? If it's both organic and mechanical. We've seen this in science fiction and all that. But we're also playing with gene editing that allows us to do enhancements using biological parts. So you can replace a kidney, for example, that maybe have a problem, with another kidney that was grown in a lab. But that new kidney, if we can, and we will be able to, we can perhaps enhance its ability to generate, to produce adrenaline, for instance. That's makes a person more competitive in sports. Maybe it has better filtration system than the original. So in this case, you may also see the emergence of a market of biological parts where people decide, without any when any other parts being defective at all, to buy into or trade for an enhancement. In this case, one that would be biological. You could also use gene editing, just like the what the Dr. Hei Jiankui did in Japan, where he enhanced through CRISPR engineering, gene editing, enhance embryos so that they would be resistant to the HIV virus. It's a small positive enhancement, but the same technology can be used to do all sorts of other biological enhancement that would be even transferable to the person's progeny. That's a choice. We can do it or not, but it really depends on how we do it. Another type of enhancement that we actually can do today. Is that type of enhancement valid, valuable? Are we changing classification from Homo sapiens to Homo novus or Homo superior if we do any kind of enhancement? But whether it's biological through DNA engineering, replacement parts, biological, mechanical, or otherwise. That's a question of classification. What does it mean to be human, though? I mean, human is more than just different parts. Because if you look into the futures with these technologies, we can end up with characters like RoboCop and Alita, and which is the new movie by James Cameron, where or the character in The Ghost in the Shell, where started off with a human person, and then most of the body and the brain, well, most of the body, not the brain, was replaced by a robotic body. The brain was reprogrammed for a certain purpose, so that it became kind of a soldier, or a police, or anything else. Well, there's just the brain. Essentially, the brain remains human, but it was reprogrammed, and the body is completely different because it's mechanical. Like, what is that? Is that a slave? Is that a machine? And these stories of science fiction kind of show that the person, if the person still remembers and still is fundamentally human in its behavior, then it is still a human being in some way. Whether the body is robotic or not doesn't really matter, even though the capabilities of this individual is extremely different and superior to the original humans. If you take the example of another example from science fiction, you have the character Data from Star Trek The Next Generation, who is entirely built, a construct. He's an android, but he was built to emulate human beings. And in the show, he is an officer, fully functional in the Starship crew, and he's considered a friend, a colleague, an equal to the rest of the crew because he's behaving human-like, and he aspires to become more human too. And there's even a special show, a very famous show called The Measure of a Man, where he's put on trial because the Federation, like the authority that he works under, like a bit of a military type of structure, they want to study him to make more of him. And that would mean he would be susceptible to be dismantled and studied, and he doesn't want that. And he's super intelligent, just like a human being, and even more so than a human being. And there's a trial because he doesn't want to go, and the Federation says, well, you're our property. You don't have rights because you are not a person, you are an android. And the case ends, make a long story short, where because he's self-aware and he functions within the crew just like anybody else and has similar capabilities or superior capabilities as other human beings, he should have the same rights as any other person, and he is given those rights. Well, he's not human at all, but he has same rights as human beings. He has no organic parts in his body. So how do we define rights, and how do we define what's human and what's not, when we can essentially replace most of our body parts within the next couple of generations with entirely mechanical parts, where we can have artificial intelligence or artificial general intelligence that is just as capable of thought and process as the character Data, as any human being. But because he's a construct that he's built through mechanical programming, well, does that entity, does that creature have the same rights as human beings? Does that person qualify as human if he or she or it have the same capabilities and has the same type of relationship as every other human being? It becomes a big social question. How are we defining ourselves within that, within these different variations of of human, some of which are the original real deal, if you will, unenhanced. Some of them are enhanced in variety of ways, mechanical, biological. Doesn't make a whole lot of difference, does it? Well, these are all questions we have to tackle within the next couple of generations, sooner in some cases than later. But we'll have a variety of types of existences, and we can even imagine, uploading ourselves to the cloud, and without anybody whatsoever, our consciousness, our behavior still lives there. Are we still human? And how does that compare to the AGI, which is essentially software, an artificial general intelligence that lives on the web as well? Well, that one was built, whereas one was uploaded from to represent an image of a human brain, but living on the cloud. What is the difference, really? Is the origin, their design, behavior? These are all really interesting questions. And I believe that what we have to do as soon as possible, we have to extricate ourselves from the classification attempts. That we already know robot, cyborg, we already define certain ways to depict different types of things we've seen in science fiction. Usually these are tagged by science fiction writers because these things don't really exist in a real tangible way, even though they actually do. Some of us are already cyborgs because we have mechanical pieces like lenses in our eyes. Some people have pacemakers, for example, insulin injectors, and so on. These are like preliminary cyborgs, if you will. But maybe we should shy away from these types of classifications that were invented by science fiction writers for describing different types of beings, because ultimately it doesn't really matter so much, and we don't want to create new segregation, a new categorization that would separate and between inferior and superior types of human beings to different variations and different types of materials that we are built out of. I think we should remain with the very neutral terms of being, and perhaps that's simpler, and perhaps our rights should be defined based on our capability of and our self-awareness and our needs as individuals. And perhaps same could be done and should be done with plants and animals based on how self-aware are they, and are they suffering or not, depending on different conditions. These are things that we are already in many ways discussing with large-scale farming, with how we're eating nowadays, vegetarians, vegans, and these kinds of discussions actually come up. How are we treating animals? Are they suffering? Are they happy? Are they natural? I mean, they have a certain level of self-awareness and consciousness. Are they equal or lesser than unintelligent human beings that may or may not have robotic bodies in the future? I mean, do we want to go there in that kind of classification and this kind of distribution of rights and responsibilities? I don't think so. I think we have to be better than that. I think we, in the face of all the variations of humanity that we will see, enhanced or not, or just repaired in some cases with enhanced parts, we want to be fair, we want to be comfortable, we want to feel like we're all on an equal footing, in a sense of being comfortable, of being allowed to live a healthy life and a comfortable one. No matter what materials we are made out of, levels of intelligences, how are we connected to the universe, how are we relating to each other. And that's going to be an interesting journey moving forward with us futurists and technologists kind of thinking about these things deeply. The engineers that are making these advancements, the scientists that are inventing and innovating and making all of this new stuff possible for us. It's just something we have to think about, and we have to be better than our historical selves that just tried to classify it and ended up with we ended up treating each other badly. So those were the thoughts. You can read the article down below, and please feel free to share your thoughts. Bye-bye for now. Until next time.